Good day, everyone. I'm Tom McDermott, a partner with Cohn Resnick. I've been with the firm for 24 years, and I'm also the chairperson of Nexia's Cybersecurity Services Group. Uh, Really excited we're able to bring you this presentation today on cybersecurity for the board, safeguarding your organization in an ever-changing threat environment. Scott Corzine with us today is Managing Director from Cohn Resnick in our Washington, D.C. office. He'll be leading the overall presentation, joined by esteemed Nexia colleagues, Catherine Moyton, the head of cybersecurity for Nexia GmbH in Munich, Ivan Badak, senior manager for Under Defense, Christoph Schillinger, the director of audit and risk advisory for Consultatio in Vienna. And together they're going to be sharing their insights regarding top cyber trends and risks, such as characteristics of adversaries, zero trust architecture, considerations for moving to the cloud, the impacts of regulations, and board's role in cyber governance and incident response. Please keep yourselves muted. If you have a question, please use the chat feature to submit your question. We're going to be monitoring the chat for questions throughout the presentation, and we'll be answering questions that come in at the end of the presentation, but I may interject with someone's question if I feel that it greatly benefits the discussion in the moment. If your question is not asked due to time, you're welcome to reach out and contact any of the presenters from today's session. The session will be recorded, and we will make that available to attendees. So we've got a full agenda today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Corzine.
Tom, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you and welcome my panelists. As Tom said, we're going to talk about why this cybersecurity is such a big organizational risk, some of the trends that we think senior management and boards should understand. We'll talk a little bit about regulatory effects on how we think about cyber governance, and then we'll open this up to questions and answers at the end or throughout, as Tom said. So let's start with the next slide. Why is cybersecurity every organization's biggest risk? I can think of 5 kind of high-level reasons that I'll pose. Today, organizational assets are mostly digital, and if they're not, they're protected by digital systems and digital infrastructure. So that means the attack surface in the last 5, 10, 20 years has expanded greatly, supported by the fact that we have the Internet of Things, where we're connecting things in our home to the Internet, and we have the industrial Internet of Things, where we're connecting industrial machines. So we've broadened the attack surface. Casual hacking has given way to sophisticated nation states and sophisticated criminal gangs doing the work with very sophisticated means. AI is going to increase this risk substantially. And so when you think about all those, it's hard to think about another organizational risk more important and more consequential than cybersecurity. So we're going to go at it from that perspective. And let's go to the next slide, please. So not only is cyber such a big risk, one of the reasons is it's a unique risk to organizations. I don't know of any other risk facing boards and management teams where the risk is intentional. People are trying to get in and do damage. It's pervasive. It's relentlessly practiced, and it's often successful. So other risks I think of, climate risks and currency exchange risks, don't have those characteristics. It's imposed by people that have really sophisticated tradecraft. They're good at what they do, and they're often successful. And because of that, it can compromise and bring down our essential assets and create operational downtime, which causes billions of dollars, as you can see from the graphic to the right. So it's this unique risk facing every organization from small mom and pop shops, if you will, to large industrial companies and services companies. So again, that's to set us off with a little background, and I'll turn it over to Catherine to talk about the global impact.
Sure, thank you for handing over. On the slide, we see the global imperatives. We actually picked out Europe, Middle East, and Asia Pacific, and this shows very well that global escalations, global arguments, and also in the case of ongoing wars, the battlefield is not further only happening on the battlefield, also that the cyber warfare is becoming more and more a part of any global escalation. When we look at Europe, the most targeted country is the Ukraine. When we look at Middle East and North Africa, we have Israel. In both countries, we have sadly a war going on. When we look at Asia Pacific, we have to point out Korea and Taiwan with the global ongoing arguments with other Asian countries. So this gives a very well overview of what is happening also on a global imperative and a global understanding what is happening and how cyber war is becoming more and more a part of global war strategies. So if you could move on to the next slide, I would be very thankful. Thank you. So when we come, this said, we are coming to 10 cyber trends to understand this, 10 outlined risks we have actually lined out in this webinar today to actually give you a little understanding how these risks are happening, what is the background of the risk, and how this risk could also be mitigated in a way. And to give you a little background, in 2018, in the case of cyber attacks, successful cyber attacks, 84% of intangible assets have been compromised. The background of this is that intangible assets are actually becoming more and more, finding more and more the way into the companies with moving to the cloud, with AI, and also with like other further new technologies. And the surface is by far wider than before the general hardware which was in place. And therefore, the damage which is happening when a cyber attack is successful is by far becoming more and more sophisticated and by far becoming more risky for the company itself. This being said, I would like to introduce you to the first risk we have lined out in this case, is how a cyber attack can be successful. First of all, the techniques and the tools are becoming more and more sophisticated. Every day, our open source code is getting a little bit lined out. It's becoming more sophisticated, more information is gathered. Employees and contractors are most likely the ones to let the intruder in by a phishing mail, by using unsecure passwords, or even leaving their laptop somewhere unencrypted or unlocked, as well as smartphones itself. And also, it's not about the enemy anymore. It's about you don't want to be the weak one in the chain of an attack.
Hey, Catherine, this is Scott. Sure. Just to add something, a quick story. We were working with an insurance company in Portugal some years ago, and we were talking about cybersecurity. And the person said, "We don't spend a lot of time thinking about cybersecurity in Portugal." And I asked, "Why not?" And he said, "Everyone loves Portugal." And I said, "Well, that may be true. I've certainly vacationed there and I love Portugal, but that has nothing to do with whether Portuguese entities are going to be suffer or are going to suffer cyber attacks." So there's a common thought with some of the people we talk to that if they don't have any natural enemies, they're safe from cyber. And as you'll see in these 10 points, that's just not the case as AI continues to automate cyber attacks.
So coming to the second identified risk from our side, it is artificial intelligence. Of course, every new technology has its good side and its bad side for us. In the case of preventive cybersecurity, of course, we are happy for better threat detection, for advanced zero-day attack, and also when we do incident response at the client sides, we have the ability to do log analysis a lot faster and also our forensic analyzers. But on the other side, of course, for the hacker or the intruder, the botnets are getting by far better every day. Data gets easily manipulated, and it's also becoming more and more difficult to actually find the manipulation of the data. We have improved phishing attacks. It's not like the typical attack anymore, where you get an email saying, "Oh, could you please transfer any money? Please click on this link." Now we actually get phishing attacks when it looks like it is an official email from the company. It is the CEO emails saying to the staff, "Okay, we want to do some donation. We want to do some fundraising. Could you please press the button?" It's sadly to say, in more than 50% of the cases, those dedicated phishing attacks are still very successful. And the privacy breaches with artificial intelligence are by far becoming not only more sophisticated, but also the damage is becoming by far higher than it used to be in the past. So when now with the help of artificial intelligence, data gets stolen, we have two things: it gets faster stolen, and it gets and the data set is becoming larger.
Okay.
So then it's my turn to take over to talk a little bit with you about hacktivism. So first of all, you have to understand why a hacker's doing what they do. So most of the time, that's for clearly commercial reasons. So they just doing their work and they want to have money from the company to set the data or whatever free. So there are different types of hackers, but one of the most dangerous ones are hacktivists. Why is that the case? First of all, the potential to political and social activism. The thing is, so if you just keep in mind, somebody's hacking your company or somebody is hacking our client, the thing is that they want to get money out of the work they did. And so you pay them a certain amount of money and you get your data back, your credentials are deleted from the darknet, whatever possible. So there is a pay solution to the situation. That's completely different if we are talking about hacktivists. So they don't want to get money. They have, let's say, what they call a higher reason for why they did the hack. And that's also why I cannot talk to them and, let's say, pay them a certain amount of money to free your data. So this is actually something that is in particular dangerous if you have, for example, investments, ESG, animal rights, emissions. So just keep in mind that if your company, your client, or let's say just the company has certain issues with ESG, with emissions, whatever possible, hacktivists might attack the company. And it's just that they publish these failures, this data online to reveal what the company did. And so this is a particularly dangerous thing. So it's no longer possible to be hidden from the public if a hacktivist is attacking your company. So there are a couple of notorious hacktivism groups you can see on the right-hand side. And now we can go on to the next slide, which we're talking a little bit about moving to the cloud. The thing is that protecting your own company, protecting your own systems is one layer. But if you're then moving to the cloud, that obviously expands the risk, what arises from cyber attacks. First of all, it's software as a service. So you are dependent on your cloud provider, and the risk concentration multiplies as it's either no longer your system or even you're giving out data somewhere in a cloud. And that what's a major issue and what also causes a significantly higher risks, as you can see from the SEC chairman, that factory loses a fire or millions of files in a cybersecurity incident, it may be material to investors. So there's no longer the, let's say, physical danger than the digital danger that arises. The last slide we're talking about, which is the trend number 5, if someone can please click, thank you very much, is resilience. You have just to understand that, as I told you on the hacktivism slide, they want to get a bunch of money for what they did. But this is just the one hand side. The even more dangerous thing is that the disruption of your operational work in your company. So if one of our clients, one of the companies get hacked, there is a pretty large downtime, and you can see that in the graph on the right-hand side of the slide, that so the typical downtime, so the average length of this interruption in days lies approximately by 3 weeks, so 21, 23 days. And this costs a lot of money. Scott actually mentioned it in the very first slide he presented. This can go way up to billions of dollars, and you can see it on a prediction that ransomware might damage costs in the height of 265 billion by 2031. So now it's your turn, Ivan, with number 6.
Cool. Thank you a lot, and pleasure to see everyone. So I just want to add to what Christopher and Catherine just said before, clarifying about the zero trust architecture. So about hacktivism, but about different, new approaches of how hackers are even more equipped with AI. We recently had a very interesting case, basically last week. So the hackers were able to get over the account of the CEO, and with the help of the AI, they managed, to learn everything about the way the CEO communicates. I mean, the tone of language, the way he writes emails, etc., etc. So with the help of the AI, the hackers wrote a really good email to their financial director, like saying, "Hey, hey Matt, you need to process this payment for like $200,000." And the financial director was about to do this payment, but he realized that he doesn't have enough money on one bank account. So he made a call to CEO saying, "Well, which bank account you want me to make a payment from?" And then CEO said, like, "What are you talking about? Like, about what payment you say, about what invoice?" So they figured out it's like a phishing email, but it was very, very real. And the guys were about to lose their money. So when we come to zero trust architecture, there's a very simple principle it operates. Never trust, always verify, which means that no one can be trusted by default, and every user might be authenticated and authorized regardless any type of the position it has or whatever other conditions. So zero trust architecture has different principles it follows. Like number one, and you can see some of them on your screen, provide users only that minimal level of access which is required to perform their tasks. So don't allow anything more they can do within their organization or infrastructure. Number two, that you need to strictly control and continuously verify all the identity of users, networks, resources, so that there's no chance for any data leakage. Number three is always monitoring the traffic, the user behavior, to make sure that there are no anomalies and there's like potential of data leakage or other stuff. Also, another important principle of zero trust architecture is the segmentation of data, which is basically very simple: never store data in one place. There are a couple of other principles, but the main thing is like always be a bit paranoid when it comes to security. And while we are moving to the next slide, we're probably gonna talk about compliance a bit, because you see, when it comes to security, most of like our customers, they come for security services because they have some compliance pressure. And what we do out like within Nexia and within other like our companies, is that compliance may not be equal to security. And what we are trying to say is that like cybersecurity develops really dynamically. Like hackers are becoming more and more creative, and basically we need to find a better protection. Therefore, it's very hard, to catch up with all best practices on the market. And when it comes to compliances, like whatever compliance you need to obtain, like SOC 2, ISO, or GDPR, or any other, depending on which territory you're located, there's interesting things that there are different regulations in different countries, but the business is global. So basically you cooperate like between Europe, North America, South America, etc. But there are different regulations in different countries. Same as businesses are also different, but compliance standards are pretty much the same. So what we are trying to say is that like compliance is a good basis when it comes, to security. But when we talk about cybersecurity, the motivation has to be the protection of enterprise assets, but not just the need to pass the compliance. So that's what I want to emphasize. And I do believe we can move forward. Yeah, and that's going to be a very, very nice slide, which you probably can read about, most famous breaches in the world. I do believe you've heard about Capital One's Uber, of course. So this slide says like one very simple thing that everyone can be hacked, like including giants. And by the way, this is not included in the slide, but one of the biggest cybersecurity companies, FireEye, they also experience a hack. So as you can see, no one can be protected. When it comes to like Uber, it is a very, very interesting case because Uber was hacked basically through social engineering. So the hacker managed to bypass two-factor authentications, and he asked the IT representative to grant him access, and that's how he got in. And then he wrote it like in a chat, a long tag that, hey guys, you've been hacked. Just for you to understand, like the budget for security of Uber was $200 million. So it's really huge. And as you can see, no matter how much you invest into security, it can be a problem due to their human factor. There are some other famous hacks I call famous, like Colonial Pipeline. You probably remember the lines of cars when there was no gas in the US, and a couple of more. So security matters, and it's really important. And I talk to the customers that sometimes it's obviously better to pay for the pen test, for the MDR. It's going to be like $10,000 or $100,000, but it's way better than these numbers when it comes to paying the ransomware. I do believe we can move forward here. Okay, what post-quantum encryption means. I will try to speak with a human language because it can be very complicated when it comes to like, technology algorithm. So what is post-quantum encryption? I would say it's a very special lock for your digital information. So it's designed to keep data safe and to defend from like super powerful computers, which are called quantum computers. So basically, like regular protection, like regular encryption methods, they may not be strong enough, to protect from this like futuristic quantum computers can basically break in the system. So this like post-quantum encryption, it's like a very special lock to keep the digital stuff safe using the most advanced technology which exists. Because as I previously mentioned, like hackers are becoming more creative. That's why we need to be more effective, creating new like ways to protect data. Guess we can move this forward as well.
Yeah, Ivan, thank you. Let's go to 10. So each of the 9 trends that we've presented to you are going to be really amplified by the fact that there's an enormous shortage of good cybersecurity talent globally. And the problem is we're all competing, consulting firms and target firms and accounting firms and advisory firms are all competing in a zero-sum game for the same rarity of good cyber people. And so that tends to favor the rich, the people that can afford to pay better salaries. Private sector companies can sometimes outcompete government companies. Certainly in the US, most government entities are resource constrained. But this is going to be a problem that's going to take decades to solve. And it's going to be solved by countries and cities and counties and entities thinking about the supply of cyber talent. Are we training kids at the high school level? Are we sending 2-year kids to college to become cyber technicians? When we graduate them from 4-year universities, are we graduating enough? And once we graduate them, can we keep them in our areas, or we're going to lose them to the high-paying private sector? This is going to be a trend that will impact how good we get at cyber for years to come. And let's move along quickly to catch up a little bit. So whether you're driven to cybersecurity by regulation, whether you're driven to cybersecurity because you have a sense of risk, or whether you're driven to cybersecurity because of litigation, which happens a lot in the US, all of these factors point to how we think about governance, how do boards and management teams think about cyber. So, Catherine, maybe speak to the board's role here a little bit.
Sure. Thank you very much, Scott. So what we have seen over the past couple of years, that cybersecurity is still a very rare topic on the agenda of board meetings, but it's becoming more and more important. And what should be part of that cybersecurity topic in board meetings is, first of all, to identify possible risks in cybersecurity, to have a reporting, a constant reporting for cybersecurity, measurements to actually measure risks and also measure mitigations, have allocated sufficient resources. This is what Scott was talking about, having people in the company who are actually able to understand cybersecurity, having controls in place, like general audit controls, what is working, if it is getting locked, if it is not getting locked, how a log file is getting read. Then, of course, what always comes also with the compliance department and also with the law department is the whole topic of regulatory compliance. This is the standard ISO compliance. This is the compliance topic for banks. This is for the automotive sector. So every sector has its own compliance regulations. Then informing itself. It means that keeping also the board level on speed when it comes to cybersecurity, also allowing them to get a better understanding what cybersecurity is all about. And it's not only about how to have like some server in a server room and a certain amount of plugs. And also thing, what we actually offer also the clients is a lesson learned after any sort of cyber breach. How did it happen without finger pointing to say, okay, this happened that and that way. And because this happened, what can we do better to avoid that something like this is happening again? And another thing, what is happening still in the days nowadays is that the CISO is plenty of times not a member of the board meeting, because the CISO is the one being responsible for cybersecurity and should also take part in those board meetings with his agenda point of cybersecurity and to mitigate risk for that.
So now what type of sizes do we have? So if we're talking about the sizes, there are typically 4 archetypes of sizes. You can see that in the picture on the right-hand side of the slide. They all coming from a different perspective where they stored from, with its own strengths and weaknesses. So we have this compliance, so more the legal and regulatory part, so the dark blue one. You have the clearly law enforced, so the yellow one, which are concentrating on forensics. You have the business operations one, so the more commercial business oriented, I would say light blue one, and the orange one, which is the technical with policies and controls. And as everyone can see, there is the gray, very tiny little spot right in the center of this picture where we are searching for. We are searching for the unicorn. Hopefully some of you have found a couple of them. The thing is, we need these generalists. So these people being able to combine all these four fields in order to obtain the right people for this position. And if you have found them, they are either extremely rare, they are extremely expensive, or really challenging to retain. And that's also where you can see the size role undergoes a major evolution. It's said in the line below. And so you have to consider, if you're not able to find the unicorn, what else is possible to, let's say, obtain a unicorn position, which means who can help you build up one of these colors or one of these fields you might be missing with your own size, or where can you get the capability or the capabilities to reach this unicorn position? And that's one of the only ways you can get there is with external help. So with external experts, they cover the positions you don't have internally. So next slide, please, Ivan, I think.
Yeah, no, it's mine. Christoph,
Oh,
thank you.
oh.
Once we have the right CISO or the right outside advisory services to help become that unicorn, we're often asked, how much money should the organization be spending on cyber? And it's difficult, so we put up 3 different ways to think about spending. The first on the upper left is how much do I spend on cybersecurity as a percent of my total IT budget? And the median is about just under 5%, 4.9%. And you can see that companies are normally between 3% and 7%. If you're looking at banks, they may be higher, 10, 11, 12, 13%. And if you're looking at other industries, often healthcare, certainly in the US, they may underspend. But that's a good way to think about IT spending that way. The second way on the right-hand side, IT spending per $1,000 of revenue, and this is measured in US dollars. So the median is $1.47, which may be about what, 175 euro. So IT spending per $1,000 of revenue is another way to benchmark your spending. And the final way is IT spending per employee. And you can see there, again, expressed in US dollars, that the median is $535 per employee. So based on the kind of company, you might choose just one or two of these measures, but a way to let the board know, are we spending about the right amount of money relative to the industry we're in and the risk we face? So let's go to Ivan with the next slide.
Yeah, I really want to, and it's a very, very good picture. So what I want to add to what just Scott and Christoph mentioned, that's never compromise with the risk, because when it comes to cybersecurity, it's always thought like it's not going to happen to me, but the truth is that it can happen to anyone. And as we like to speak, it's like not a question if, it's a question when. So you need to be prepared. So to the board, I would just say a couple, recommendations is number one is hire the specialists, equip them, because you definitely need a person who is dedicated into security. Always educate staff. So it's very good to make this awareness training, because no matter like how much you invest into security, there's always a human factor, and it should be implemented. So good education is always an option. And obviously use third-party vendors, specialized companies who would run a pen test, or who could help you with 24/7 monitoring. And all this together would make sure that your security posture, security level is quite good at current moment. Cool. I do we can move forward.
Yeah. Why spend money on cybersecurity? So what we see here in Europe is most of the times you get the question, what is the return of cybersecurity invest? A very common question out of the accounting department saying, okay, if we spend money, where's the invest? Because security is something, it's a feeling you don't see it, but you spend money for it. So it is the invisible thing for the accounting department to spend money on. But I think on the slide you see very well with the green bars, with like spending a little bit on preventive cybersecurity. And this could be a health check just to understand where the potential risks of a company, or also where's my intellectual property or golden nuggets, where is the stuff that should really be secured, what would be for an intruder very interesting to actually take it from you, compared to the other hand, how much you actually have to spend once you get like fully encrypted. To give you an example, we here in Germany, we do as preventive cybersecurity as well as reactive cybersecurity. So with the preventive part, we have sometimes a quick health check, what is maybe like 10,000 euros, and we identify one or two risks, and then we go in and with the client together develop a solution to close these potential risks. When it comes to incident response, within 4 to 6, 8 weeks, the client easily spends 500,000, 600,000 euros just for forensic incident response, crisis management, and also the entire compliance, what has to be done here, what department of the government needs to be informed, and things like this. So you easily see with like spending a little on preventive cybersecurity, you can save yourself a lot of money compared to getting hacked and getting encrypted on the end of the day. And as Ivan said, it's not a question of are you getting hacked? It's a question of when, and when is also the point you're actually getting to know you're getting hacked.
Catherine,
So,
let me just
Scott,
add this. Yes.
I was just going to interject for a moment. Understanding that organizations have different sizes and different uh, points of maturity. For the panel, what are the controls that are either low-hanging fruit or give the most bang for your buck for small and medium-sized businesses with regard to cyber risk?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tom. I'll take a crack at that. I think the single most important thing is training and awareness. Over and over training the staff to not click on that very tempting email. I think changing passwords, using strong passwords, and having them changed at least 4 times a year is key. Obviously, the IT shop has to patch when patches come out from Microsoft or anyone else. The patching cadence is critical. And then finally, the extent that most everyone runs M365, Microsoft 365, having a diagnostic done on your M365 and just adjusting those security controls can be 4 huge things that even small companies can do inexpensively to improve their cyber risk. Anyone else?
Thanks, Scott.
Maybe I would like to add something. I think sometimes it's also important for the companies to actually get to know what is their value, their valuable assets, because sometimes they don't even really know what is the most valuable IP they have and how can they secure it the most possible way.
That's right. Catherine, before we leave this slide, I want to emphasize something you and Christoph and Ivan all said. The fact that we're all going to be breached tells you that if you look in the green area, there are a number of those expenditures like business continuity that are response-oriented expenditures. So the fact is you'll be breached, but if you invest in a business continuity plan, and if you have business interruption insurance, you're going to, on average, this is a global number, have just dropped your cost of a breach by a large amount of money. So it's not just the preventative expenditures, but it's the response and business recovery expenditures that really gets to what Ivan and Christoph talked about around operational downtime. So I just wanted to emphasize that before we go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, the next slide is, as Christoph was talking before, the perfect unicorn everybody is looking for, but the perfect unicorn is very rare in the market, nearly impossible to find, and I think even harder to keep them. So what can organizations do? Hire cyber familiar board members, have people in the board who actually have a understanding what cybersecurity is all about, what are risks, why should there be money be spent, what is artificial intelligence, how artificial intelligence can be used to actually prevent the company from getting hacked. Then engage independent experts from different companies. This could be, of course, that could be anybody here's who's on the call, but I mean the competitive market is very large. Getting people in with the knowledge for certain areas, for certain topics, to support you, to actually close potential gaps, to get your company secure, to put the walls down in order to prevent an intruder to come in, and also train board members on the basics. We had several of incident responses in our previous professional career where the intruder actually came in through to weak passwords or an easy way of pressing buttons on phishing emails. And that was plenty of times somebody from the board who wasn't aware of that this could be a threat or this could be a potential harm to the company. So giving them an understanding, what is a phishing mail, what is cybersecurity, what is a safe password, why not to press on anything, why not to download anything from a funny looking website, and things like this. This really keeps, in the end of the day, the company to some certain extent safe, because the easiest way for intruders still is to come in via any sort of employee or board member, because somebody pressed some button, somebody left some gate open, and the intruder will always find that little tiny gate which is open and makes his way through it.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank my fellow panelists. I hope for the audience, this kind of high-level strategic look at cybersecurity and cyber risk as being most organizations' important risk has been, helpful and thought-provoking. We've left 15 minutes in anticipation of questions that you may have raised or put into chat. And we'd like to invite those questions now, if we can do that, Rob, whether that's through you or through some other means.
Sure, Scott. We'll jump in. I'll read them aloud for those that haven't seen them. So first question coming to us from the UK. How have recent cyber incidents such as ransomware attacks influenced the enforcement of rules and regulations? Great question.
It is a great question. From the U.S. perspective, I know this is a UK question. We've seen an enormous jump in ransomware, and it gets to whether law enforcement is suggesting we pay ransoms or try not to pay ransoms. There are rules and regulations coming out from the insurance sector that where you have to bring your insurance company into that decision. And of course, every organization still tries to keep these attacks under the surface because it's not great publicity. So I think it's driving, because it's high profile, it certainly drives the U.S. Congress to think about increasing regulation. And I know in the U.S. there are at least 12 federal agencies that have some regulatory responsibility over transportation or airlines or defense or healthcare. So it's certainly getting the attention of regulators, and I think you'll see an increase in severity of regulation and an increase in the enforcement of regulation through fines and regulatory actions.
And maybe to bring another perspective in, so if you have a cybersecurity insurance, or if you're in a lucky position to have the, let's say, requirements, what the insurance company sets on your cybersecurity and incident management is raising day by day. So this is also a separate factor you have to consider when talking about all these kind of things. So also this can, even if it's not directly, let's say, from any regulatory authority, it might end up that you have to do anything, even if it's just, let's say, to fulfill the requirements for the insurance policy.
So we'll go to the next question. I know we touched on this a little bit, but Anna asked, what are the major best practices to mitigate the risk from cybersecurity for an asset management firm?
Interesting. I'll take a crack at that. Whether this is a family office or a venture capitalist or a private equity firm, we have the portfolio effect. We see a number of, in the U.S., we see a number of private equity firms looking at hiring a cyber capability from either CohnReznick or one of our competitors or another Nexia provider to essentially be an on-call CISO available to the portfolio companies as they grow and become more and larger and more regulated in their own industry. So we have ongoing discussions and some relationships with private equity firms that use us on an ad hoc basis to come in and be available as an expert. I think Catherine or Ivan or Christoph said this, when you look for that unicorn, it's impossible for the portfolio companies, as small as they can be, to be able to afford that. But the private equity firm may be able to afford a firm that can provide that unicorn capability. So I think we see that as a trend in asset management in the States.
Okay, so we'll move on. Jumping around a little bit. What's the best approach to advise a board to set aside a budget and commence a cybersecurity regime for the organization?
Well, I'll take the first crack, and I'd like to hear from my European friends. I think the biggest challenge, Tom, that boards face is most of them don't have the same independent relationship with the CISO that the board's audit committee has with the CFO. It's long been the case that the board audit committee is independent and it talks directly to the CFO about financial matters. I'd like to see that same relationship move to the CISO, where I think Christoph said many CISOs are not considered officers. They're considered technology people. And so they don't have the same interface with board members independently. An ideal governance situation would be for the board to develop a risk committee and have that risk committee independently able to talk to the CISO without that conversation being managed by senior management. So the board gets an unfettered view of the problems, the solutions, the budgetary needs, and can help the government help govern that part of the company with management. How about someone on the EU side? Any different view on that?
I won't say different, Scott, but I want to just add something which might be vital to this one. If you're talking about financials, so there is a financial auditor which is kind of like mandatory on a certain size of company. So, and every year the financials gets audited by an external expert. And then some problems might arise in the internal controls or wherever possible. If you just think one particular moment about the same situation in cyber, let your cyber systems, let your let's say everything what's in place right now being audited by an external person, I'm pretty sure the outcome will convince the board to set aside a budget for that.
Thank you,
Tom?
Christoph.
I think that was just for me that to underline how you can more like draw attention to this fact. As you mentioned before, it's just like the CISO is not that long. Let's say a communication part with the board itself, and so there's a need for something else, like as I said, for an external audit to put more pressure on that issue. That is just I want to add on that.
Yeah, Tom, let me add one other thing. I think I don't want to beat up on the board so much, even though we need to get more knowledge of cybersecurity at the board level. But the responsibility also falls on the CISO. If the CISO, it can only do techno speak and speaks at a technical level above the board's acumen, then CISOs, if they want to get into the boardroom, need to speak board speak, which is all about protection of the assets of the company. So they have to think in terms of cybersecurity as risk management and as a risk to the company meeting its objectives in an ERM perspective. So it's not just that the board needs to get smarter about cyber, but CISOs need to learn to talk to the board in the language the board uses in order to be effective.
Scott, I just want to add, like, that's pretty much like the perfect explanation of how, that impact can be on the board, because CISOs definitely need to speak the board language. And for example, when we prepare, the reports after like certain services, we not only use this technical reports, technical language, but also a business review. Basically, it's not only what happens to your, infrastructure, but also different, cybersecurity incidents can affect your business, like money loss, reputation loss, etc., etc. So it's not about the board learning what CISO does, but basically what problems the CISO can help to prevent.
Great.
So maybe as the last one in this round, I would like to add something as well. First of all, I would totally agree with Christopher. When we get preventive cybersecurity projects, it often happens due to findings in the audit, that some of the technical parts weren't in place the way it should be. Second of all, is new technologies introduced. So moving to the cloud, using blockchain or whatsoever, this is the point where the board normally puts aside a budget for cybersecurity to secure the new technology. And the third one is what is very over here in Germany pushy is the whole topic of governmental regulations, new standards for banks, new releases for manufacturing, for pharmaceutical or whatsoever, with that they have to do something within a certain period of time. This is the point where preventive cybersecurity gets the budgets they need to in order to fulfill the requirements.
Yeah, and if I could expand upon that and reiterate what was said before, right? Compliance does not always guarantee security. And the annual financial audits are designed by your financial auditors, and they're designed to manage your financial auditor's risk, right? They are focused on your financial reporting and disclosure. They're not designed to be holistic views of your information technology risk and controls or your cybersecurity risk and controls. And that's why it's very important to have your own independent assessments performed so you can understand the cybersecurity threats and risks to your organization and determine what strategy and resources are most appropriate for you. So I think we have time for one more question for the chat. Yvonne, maybe you can take this one. Does usage of a paid VPN like NordVPN reduce the chances of hacking a system?
Good question. So like simple question. Well, it can reduce. It can be just additional layer of security. So basically, you're going to be a bit more protected. But obviously, it doesn't exclude, the risk of being hacked. So just some more security, as I said. So
Okay, well,
I do
I'm
believe it's a
sorry.
simple question, so it doesn't have like extended reply. So yes, it's a bit more security, additional layer, but no, it doesn't, exclude the risk of being hacked.
It's one more measure to take for the defense in depth strategy.
Absolutely.
So we're coming up to our time. I want to thank the panelists, and I'd like to thank all the attendees. Thank you for the engagement and the questions. I apologize to those questions that we weren't able to get to, but to reiterate what we said at the beginning, if there was a question that you asked or maybe didn't get a chance to ask, and you want to reach directly out to myself or any one of the panelists, please feel free to do so. And there was a request earlier to make the slides available. We'll also work on getting those slides in a location that those who attended are able to access them.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.